presents imminent risks to the health of the attendees. Therefore, no physical meeting location will be available. To access the meeting remotely, join from a computer, including an iPad or iPhone, and using the URL that's posted online. To the health of the attendees. Therefore, no physical meeting location will be available. To access the meeting remotely, join from a computer, including an iPad or iPhone. Okay. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, there's a number 699-900-6833, which is online. You enter your meeting ID, which is also online, but it's 822-8122-8507. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Great. So shall we have a conversation about the agenda? Everybody is, I know that there doesn't appear to be any last minute changes. I'm getting confused with the general meeting.
No, we're fine.
Cool. All right. Everyone okay with the agenda?
Yes.
Can we have a motion do we need to do that?
No,
So
you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There's no objection. Agenda approved. Yeah.
Agenda approved, no objections, either seen or heard. Agenda approved. Public comment. Are there members of the public present today? Seems to be
I
7.
don't think
No.
let's see.
Oh.
No.
I think isn't that the second time in a row? Okay, so not seeing any members of the public and not seeing any raised hands for public comment. Let's shift immediately into old business. Now, I know we have 10 minutes until Lieutenant Montgomery comes. I just want to make sure that he doesn't feel as if though some substantive stuff.
I'll text him.
Yeah, text him, let him know. In the meantime, we can start to kind of queue up the draft. We
Maybe I could say something quick. I don't know if people saw the
Yeah.
email that I sent, but after our hearing on Monday, which was very contentious, and Sergeant Ross was there representing the union and raised several issues. And I reached out to him via email to ask if we could have a call, because I thought some of the points he made actually were meritorious. And he
Julie,
didn't
I'm
get-
sorry, what hearing are you talking about?
It was the first hearing. It was the first complaint hearing of the
Oh, the
Police
complaint
Accountability
hearing.
Board.
Okay,
We used to
Right.
call those, and this is for Ms. Saganor also, we used to call those boards of inquiry. And that's how we would resolve our complaints. And now they're referred to as hearing panels. And again, it was the first one under the Police Accountability Board. Take it away, Julie.
Yeah,
We're running
just so I felt bad afterwards, because I felt bad for a while about the lack of collaboration with the union particularly, and all the obstacles that is thrown up. And so I just said in a very nice email that I would love to have a call with him and how great it would be to have him attend our meetings. And then today I wrote back again, just following up and asking him to attend tonight. And then Byron pointed out that perhaps because he was the rep at our hearing, that maybe he personally wouldn't be receptive, and that maybe it's better to reach out to the union, like president and vice president. And what I put in my email today to you all was just, maybe we should do something more formal, just so, and copy the council, just so we're on record is really reaching out to them repeatedly. And I couldn't remember, I don't think we've done something like that before, but I know Kathy, you have invited them, but it just feels like nothing's happening. And so anyway.
I didn't point out that actually Scott Castle was at the last regulation subcommittee meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah, for most of it.
So that's right. Board Director Lee had mentioned that to me. I know that he didn't say anything, but we want to make sure that when he's there, that we are actually aware that a member of the BPA is there, and to encourage him to engage with us. We could actually ask him, what are your thoughts? And if he feels that it's not an appropriate moment to engage or speak, then he can say so. but at least that way we know that he's present and he's not responding for a particular reason. But that is an important first step, that they actually be there, but we'd rather them be engaged participants and not just an observer. So,
So,
yeah.
do people think it's worth me reaching out to the leadership of the union, or should I let it go?
Well, I should let you know, I was gonna tell the whole board this next week, but I've had a conversation, separate conversations with Scott Castle, the vice president, and with Mike, and about meeting. And Scott wanted to bring the president, who's Darren Kaselik, and Mike suggested asking Nathan. So it would just be the 5 of us. And I want to create a safe space for people to talk openly about what it would take to get people, to get the board and union leadership really talking productively. So I think both sides have things that the other side should hear, and that each side needs to understand where the other is coming from, because I think there's some misunderstandings. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And there might be some just, ignorance is too harsh of a word. They're just maybe unawareness of sometimes what things are said that have an impact. So
It sounds like I don't, you got it covered.
if you know,
So-
and I don't want to discourage you, like if you wanted to have a separate conversation with Sergeant Ross because you were in a particular situation, I think if he wants to do that, that's fine, but you should know what I'm working on.
No, that's good. I don't think he wants to, or at least he didn't respond to 2 emails, but
Okay.
anyway, okay, well, we can move on. I just
Well,
wanted
I'm not, as I told you, I'm not sure because the hearing was Monday and I don't think we've given him enough time to respond. And I don't know if he's not necessarily receptive. What I was saying earlier was he was representing an officer at a hearing. So maybe he feels it's not appropriate at this
Right.
point.
Right, and-
That case is resolved, but I don't really know. I would suggest giving it more time.
Yeah, I just won't push it anymore though.
But I'm glad, no, I think it was good. I don't think you pushed it. I think it was really worthwhile for you to reach out as a board member. And I think that as time goes on, each board member should make their own outreach to the union leadership, to the chief. I mean, that's how we were able to get things done in the city for decades.
And I did reach out to the chief, and I think I had mentioned that before, and I'm going to have coffee with her, but it sounds like the
great.
problem is more with the union than with them, but in any event.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
for those efforts.
Could I just follow up on that? It's
Yeah.
unclear to me, when we reach out as board members to various members of the department, whether it be the chief or the union leadership, it's unclear to me whether we need to have sort of authorization to speak as a board member, or like, how does that work?
No, as long as you're not representing the board. I mean, you're just you're developing a personal relationship and having a one-on-one conversation, and that's fine.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Kat, I had actually asked Director Lee about that too. As long as they're not making statements of assertions on behalf of the board, but also comments about pre-decisional issues, like the full board hasn't heard it yet.
Yeah.
Right, don't make promises on behalf of the whole board. I think
I know
it's
you guys
really-
aren't going to do that anyways.
It's really valuable for you to get to know officers.
Yeah.
And I
Probably
think that's
to
one
reach out.
reason that the ride-alongs have been pushed. I mean,
Hmm.
not just the union, I think the department really would like board members to see their people in action and what patrol is like, because that's sort of your typical, that's where the officers have interaction with the public, right? And so they really want that. And if you haven't done that, I know we're.
It is helpful though for us to let each other know, just like FYI. And my purpose in reaching out to her was just to say, we would love to collaborate more, not to talk about specific things other than, can we work this out a little bit? Because I feel like we're quite dysfunctional right now and it makes us less effective. So that was my point in reaching out to her, was just to say, how can we communicate better?
Sure. I think developing those relationships are really important interpersonally amongst the board members and the BPD. And then more formally, Kathy, Director Lee and I and others will have routine meetings and we'll report back to you. As necessary, we might invite you guys on to some of the meetings too. But right now it's really important, I think, to break the ice, so to speak, and have some conversations about some of the concerns on the BPA side, but also some of the concerns on the PAV side about confer, et cetera, meeting confer, and to have a conversation, because there is some, I think, misunderstanding on both sides. So we can move from there, knowing that we are in a meet and confer situation.
And also that's one piece of it. The other piece of it for me is how we conduct ourselves in these meetings, at the full meeting, the statements that come out of our mouths. We have to be cognizant of how that's going to be perceived to the department that we oversee, that you oversee. So I think when we say such things as, and I've talked to a couple of you about this before, but when we're discussing an item that could be contentious and we say, well, they can just meet and confer, that doesn't really invite participation, I don't think. We have to find areas where we can compromise. Now, I recognize that there's some times we just have to say we've tried or we can't get there, and that's it. But we have to show, I think, as this board, that we are listening to the police union, as much as we listen to the complainants.
That's why they need to come and talk to us.
They need to say something for us to listen to.
We can't listen unless they talk to us.
I agree with you, but I'm just, I think there's a perception that you won't listen or you won't hear.
Well, when they come on board, I think they'll be dissuaded from that. I think if you seriously sat in on some of the meetings that have been held, even under the prior PRC, as Izzy has noticed, a very professional board. And when we talk about changing regs or making amendments to the regs, they're based upon modern due process standards. It's not meant to like take away power or limit POBRA for police officers. That's not our intent at all. In fact, my position has always been that the more protections you put in place, in a place in terms of a proper balance between the civil liberties of individuals and the rights to law enforcement and safety of police departments, it actually protects the police department more so than without those regulations. I think it's, very pragmatically speaking, it helps to manage liability if everybody knows the rules in advance and the rules are fair. So I hope that comes across. And I know that sometimes the language could be interpreted one way or the other, but we need to have good faith on both sides. And, we're breaking the ice with them to show them that, yes, we have good faith. And if you come to the meetings and tell us what your perspective is, and sometimes we might change our mind and maybe we will realize that, okay, that's based upon an assumption that's inaccurate. And I think that's
happened a lot of times in the PRC. We changed our minds on a lot of things based on their input.
Yeah. So I know Investigator Norris and Director Lee that you guys have been working hard behind the scenes to kind of pave things forward. And so having these routine meetings will be helpful, I think, and also asking them to come to the meetings and actually engage. Board Member Owens?
So I want to jump in and say that I agree with Investigator Norris. I personally have heard some comments made in our board meetings that to me were, I'll just say, biased. And I actually reached out to the director and asked her if we as a board could take some sort of implicit bias class, primarily because, per the charter, and I'm totally going to use the charter as the guide, we're supposed to be independent and objective. And I think in order to do that, we all need to kind of check our biases at the door. And we all have biases. I'm not saying I don't. We all have biases. So I think it would be, I will just say that I've heard things that I kind of thought, really? So I can imagine, the union feeling the same way on some of those things. So it is difficult to move forward and come up with regulations that are fair when it's only one side that's kind of doing the communication, which is us and the board. So I agree with everybody that it would be helpful if the union participated, but I can say that I've heard things that I thought was biased. So that's just my thoughts.
Sure, and every board member may have a different opinion on X issue, and there's no expectation by myself as a chair or in general in these type of committees or commissions that every member have lockstep viewpoints. That actually would be quite bad, of course. We just want to make sure that there's consensus in order to move forward enough to complete our work. So I'm fine with implicit bias training. I certainly, do get a lot of that in other contexts. But if you guys want to add that on as a training practice, that could be, and then something we could do as part of our, I don't even know where we are at with our 40 hours, but there's so many
A lot
hours.
of ways to go.
Yeah, so that could be one of them. And I think implicit bias trainings are pretty prevalent now and like free. I don't know if there's something about, there could be something specific about developing community-based policing practices that could also talk to, kind of equanimity between police departments and those who they police. I don't know if there's anything specific to commissions. I doubt it, but if there is, we could look at that. Just so people understand that, yes, police officers are people too. I understand that. So that I'm interested in that. That said, the critical kind of component here is they have to show up though. If they're not here, there is no engagement. And I was totally shocked when I learned that Mr. Castle was on the phone or on the line, and I hadn't realized that a member was there. I wish he would have just announced himself. And if they take the position, I get labor, I'm a labor person myself, that during a meeting confer, we're not going to talk, but I'm coming here to be present, then fine, just say that. But I actually didn't know he was there.
Okay.
So-
Well, he can't, as an attendee, he can't announce himself. So
Oh, he cannot.
I apologize for noticing and not saying anything. I would have had to,
Okay.
kind of interrupt, but
That's cool. Next time, can you
Right.
announce that he's present, Kathy? And also,
yes.
so as an
Okay, so
attendee-
Lieutenant Montgomery is present.
okay, he is present now. Great. Good to know. And he's not an attendee, he's a
He's a panelist.
panelist. All right, so
Hello, everyone.
hello. Sorry about the
Hello.
confusion. I was able to hustle over here on time, but so we didn't dig into the regs yet, but we're just talking about housekeeping and some general issues about engaging with the BPA, which we're going to invite them back again. And Director Lee and I and Vice Chair Mizell will be having a meeting with the BPA and try to have routine meetings. So my recollection is we went through the entire regs. So we want to stick to the 2 hours so people don't get burnt out and get upset. Let's go 6:45 to 8:45. And I think we start at the top is my understanding. Board Member Owens.
Yeah, I kind of want to back up. And the reason why I want to back up, and Kitty probably knows what I'm about to say, maybe or maybe not, but we were just in the fair and impartial meeting before this one. And in that meeting, we received an email from the chief, and she gave us a sample of the new civilian complaint form. And Kitty actually brought it up in our fair and impartial. On that form, they accept anonymous complaints. And so we had a whole discussion last week about an anonymous complaint. And I'm going to read you what it says on their form. It says any complaint can be made anonymously. However, not providing your name and contact info may affect our ability to conduct a full investigation and provide you with the results of your complaint. So I am going to backtrack on what I was saying before about the anonymous complaints. I think we need to include them. The department is including them. So I don't think I think that we should also include them. And maybe some of the wording that they use that, may
Yeah.
affect the ability to do a full investigation. Maybe we use some of that same kind of terminology, but I'm back on board with anonymous complaints.
Okay, so is the request then to quickly drop into that and check the language of that based upon board member Owen's language? And then we need to move up to the top again, then start going through for a full review.
Well, the anonymous complaints is still in.
Yeah,
Is there something
think-
about it that you want changed, board member Owens?
Wasn't there a concern about how we will retain the complainant's anonymity once we send it over to the police department to open up their parallel investigation? I think that's an area where we still have to work out, right, Kitty?
yeah. Well, I don't know if we want to get stuck on this particular item again. However, I did learn that when it goes over to the police department, the complainant can decline to be interviewed. And therefore, I think that becomes a moot problem if there is such a thing. In other words, it seems to me it can remain anonymous at the police department because the complainant is not required to be interviewed over there. So they can decline to be interviewed and retain their confidentiality.
I do like the idea of maybe adding some of the language, though, that Cheryl mentioned.
We can add some of that language,
Yeah.
but as I understand it, about half of the complainants that we get decline to be interviewed by the BPD. And so that becomes a non-issue.
Right, right.
So
But does it limit our investigation? Or no? I mean, if someone's anonymous, does it put any obstacles in our process?
Well, I think I want to clarify what we're talking about when we talk about anonymous. Are we talking about we don't know who filed this complaint, or we know, but they don't want anybody else to know?
Right.
That makes a difference. If we know who
It
they are,
does.
we can interview them. But if we don't know who they are, then we can't.
Right.
And I think those are the kinds of anonymous complaints that the police department is talking about.
I personally am comfortable with us knowing and them not knowing, where I wasn't comfortable last time we met, because I was like, well, how will they be able to do their complete investigation, blah, 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 blah. But they have a process where they may not be able to do their complete investigation because somebody wants to file anonymously. So I don't personally right now, I'm leaning towards, I'm okay with us knowing who it is and sending it over, being anonymous on the PD side.
We should clarify, though, because it could be interpreted, and I don't know if we should go back right now or not, but maybe just put a pin in that we need to be sure that we're clear what anonymous means. And if we're saying we will not disclose your identity, that's one thing versus you don't even need to tell us who you are.
yeah,
Right.
can we quickly propose language to drop in there? And one thing is putting an pin in it, but I'm afraid when we get back to it,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
put in some time, but we want to be fast about this. I think we've
So
talked.
what page is it?
Anonymous.
It's page 21, right?
So can I make this suggestion?
Yeah.
Because the rest of our subcommittee here hasn't received this copy of this complaint form, they don't have this. Maybe what we do, I don't know, Kathy, can you send it to them? And then maybe when we meet the next time, we put this off, since it's at the back end of our regulations anyway, and discuss it then, keeping in mind that we need to kind of think about what does anonymous mean? Is anonymous to us? Is anonymous is known to us and anonymous to the PD? Or is it both,
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
just my suggestion.
Okay, if you're I can send that if that's what people would like to do.
Then just maybe put a comment or note, Kathy, at that point, you know, on page 21, just need to clarify meaning of anonymous or something like that.
Yeah, you can put a flag there.
And that in A somewhere, yeah.
Lieutenant Montgomery has his hand raised.
So I just want to clarify also, if an anonymous complaint were accepted, it would be, there'd be a way to establish that the person was either a recipient witness or that they were the aggrieved party. That we would find a way to establish that to ensure that they weren't somebody who saw it on the internet or something like that. Saw the activity or whatever brought them to complain about on the internet. We're not creating a third category of person that's neither a recipient witness nor a aggrieved party to bring complaints.
This is,
Correct?
Lieutenant, this is under the category of informal complaints. And so it's my understanding, we have that on the, yeah. So informal complaints is this category that we had under the PRC, where it's a communication from any member of the public, not on a complaint form. Well, you can read that whole thing, that identifies an officer by badge or specific circumstances and so forth. And so this is not a formal complaint in which the complainant is defined as an aggrieved party or a recipient witness. This is a more informal communication. So I don't know, Kathy, did we used to get these informal complaints and
Yes, yes, and we would say, this is how you file a formal complaint, or if it's a policy issue, this is how you can bring it before the board. We would tell them what if they wanted their complaint against an individual officer to be investigated, they had to file on our complaint form. That's what we would tell them.
Okay. And so to be clear, in a case that those are the kind of cases that could result in discipline, those anonymous complaints would then be limited to the other two categories, recipient witness or aggrieved party. Is that right? When it's not an informal complaint? I know I'm kind of speaking broadly about it, the different kinds of anonymous complaints now. Sorry if I diverted from that section.
I wasn't thinking of anonymous complaints as one of those formal complaints. I wasn't thinking of those formal complaints being anonymous. I was thinking about this more informal process that could lead to a board initiated investigation.
Okay,
that would-
I'm glad, Kitty, that I'm hearing you say this, because when we're getting into the investigation stage, to me, that means it's a formal complaint.
Even if it's board initiated?
Yes. If we're going to investigate individual officers for possible alleged misconduct, they need to be afforded all of the procedural protections under these regulations.
Even if it's just a preliminary investigation, it's like, we don't know. Right? Isn't that
At
why
the
we have
point-
the investigations?
At the point where we know and we say, Officer X, we are alleging that you used excessive force,
Right, right.
then it's a formal investigation, a formal
And-
complaint investigation.
Once notification is received of the alleged misconduct.
Yeah,
But the board can initiate that.
under what you're proposing.
Under board initiated complaints.
Well, you initiated investigations in the two recent death cases.
Right,
Sure.
right.
And that was after a review of the facts with regard to whether, we essentially made a determination of whether or not the information that was received was sufficient to trigger an investigation. And you and Investigator Norris do that routinely. You do an intake, a pre-investigation process, and then some of those get dismissed. Some of those complaints are dismissed, right? Of course, you go to the
Well,
board.
we have to ask you to dismiss
dismiss
them,
them.
yes.
Yeah. And then some of them you propose moving forward, for example. And then when they are moved forward, that's the formal complaint. Then it requires notification to those who have been alleged to have.
Because anytime you're
Yeah.
alleging, you're telling a specific officer that they are being investigated and it could result in discipline, then all these procedural protections come into play.
Sure.
Right, but our investigations are, we don't even know who the officers are. We don't know, I mean, this type of investigation, we don't even know their identity necessarily in the ones that we've started, right? So there's nobody to
Right.
notify.
Sure. And that could be a potentially like more of a policy type of investigation, quote unquote policy, broadly speaking. So here with the informal complaint, is my understanding, would it be that it's coming to the board and we're doing the kind of similar thing as Kathy just noted with the two instances recently with the deaths, one in the hospital and then one with the
Those I don't consider to be informal complaints. Those are board initiated investigations, which in my
Investigation.
mind have always been formal.
You
Okay.
know, the more I think about it, the more I wonder if this category of informal complaints is unnecessary in the sense that what I thought this section was trying to get at is that we can get information from various sources, including anonymous folks who come forward to let us know about some incident, whether it be the death of the man outside of the police station or whether it be something else, but that we can get information from various sources, launch a preliminary investigation, and if it would come to that, an investigation of possible misconduct by an individual officer, at which point all of those formal protections, of course, would come into being. So an informal complaint I thought of as just a person informally coming forward with some information, and if we consider it worthwhile, pursuing a preliminary investigation. So maybe it's unnecessary to have this like
As long as the other provisions, and I'm looking for them, board initiated investigation, where that is, as long as we don't need to add anything to that, right?
right. Well, board initiated investigations are like the ones that we've got going on now, and that
Yeah.
information can come to
Right,
us.
I was just wondering if we needed to add, again, I can't find it right now, if we need to add anything to that other section, but maybe what we do is just get going at the beginning and just realize that maybe we get rid of that, maybe we do get rid of that. But I somehow remember looking at the board initiated investigation part and thinking, oh, that is something a little different. So we just want to make sure we're being clear someplace.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe we should, I put this in here. These used to be in your standing rules. I put them in here just because I thought it made sense, but it seemed to have confused everybody. So maybe we should take it out.
Maybe, can we not decide this minute?
We don't have to,
So let me clarify something for myself.
sure.
So this informal complaint, the thought was, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, somebody says, hey, I saw XYZ, they bring it to the board, and the board initiates an investigation. So I guess for me, the struggle is, yes, we initiated investigations in 2 events currently, but no one has come to us in those 2 events and said, it's Officer X, it's badge number X, it's this person, nothing. It's just this event happened, we would like the board to investigate. To me, once you start identifying officers, now you're bringing up potential discipline. Because if the person comes in and anonymously says it's this person, this badge number, now this does become potentially a discipline thing. Whereas like with our investigation for those other two events, because right now they're not potentially disciplined because we don't have the information. It's not like it can't turn into something like that. But what we moved forward with as a board wasn't a potential discipline situation. It currently isn't. Like I said, it may change, but right now it isn't. But this, if they come to us informally and say it's this officer with this badge number, that at that point, the minute they tell you who it is or who they think did something, that's potential discipline. So to me, that's a different beast. I don't know how this informal would work. I mean, at that point, it becomes formal because it's potentially discipline. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. The whole reason for having this was, I think I told you this last time, we had a situation where I published something in a packet. Somebody wrote an email,
Oh, right.
and per our procedures, when a member of the public communicates with the board or the commission, then I would put it in the packet. Well, this particular email was complaining about a named officer. And I got a little slap on the wrist. And we received an opinion from the deputy city attorney, and it's part of your, I think it's in the November 9th packet, going through what informal complaint was and why it had to be treated confidentially. And that was the bottom line, which was, should not have been put in the packet. Because it does identify an officer, it has to be treated as a personnel complaint under 832.5 or 0.7 of the penal code. And so the suggestion was PRC should have a process for how it wants to handle these. And so the process that the PRC came up with was, okay, these should be agendized. We want staff to bring these to us and look at them and suggest what staff might do, which might have been a little overkill, because really what we would do was say, okay, do you want us to investigate with possible discipline, or do you want to explore a policy complaint? Otherwise, we really can't do anything except send it to the board as a confidential matter. So that was the genesis of this, which was, the earlier version was in your standing rules, or in the PRC standing rules. And in developing these regulations, I glommed onto the word complaints. I thought, let's take it out of there and put it in here. But
Okay.
Going
Thanks.
back, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Let me ask a quick question then. I think Investigator Norris and Lieutenant Montgomery each have their hand raised. I just want to make sure I kind of knit this together from my understanding and based upon the questions I'm hearing. So if, given your experiences, Director Lee and Investigator Norris, something that comes in the door that doesn't have a name attached to it, but for that example, you don't want to let it sit there. So you want to be able to just check if there is an issue here. But
doesn't have a complainant's name, or an author's name, or a
both.
officer's name.
It could be both, but in this case, probably more likely than not, it could be like without a complainant's name, and then there could be some form of identification, perceptual, whatever, or otherwise, of it happened at this time.
I don't think we do anything. If they don't identify themselves, how can we get in touch with them?
Right. So that's one version of it. And then the other version of it is they have identified themselves, but they want anonymity. Right. That comes to the door.
Well, we've always required them to identify themselves on a complaint form. So previously we would never process that. We would reject it as not meeting the basic requirements of filing a complaint.
And
An
then,
informal complaint?
No,
What about-
a complaint where somebody doesn't want to give us their name and they file a formal complaint.
Right, but what about informal complaints?
Well, that doesn't get them anywhere.
okay, so
Well, I think maybe we should go, put a pin in this, because let us all think about it. And I think we should start at the beginning so that we get something done.
yeah, I think we should. I'm gonna go through the questions, but we should put a pin in it, and then if you don't mind, Director Lee, you can send forward what Board Member Owens
Yes,
had referenced, and
I don't mind at all.
sure, and that can be a reference point. And then since that was convincing to Board Member Owens, we want to see what was convincing about it. It sounds though, from what I hear from Board Member Owens, is that to address this potential issue of sending something over to the department where there's no name, there seems to be language that suggests that there could be a process where at least when you and Investigator Norris receive the complaint, at least they should have their information there as you've required. However, when it gets bumped over, if and when it gets bumped over, then that information is confidential. And then I understand that Lieutenant Montgomery has some questions about, not confidential, anonymous, sorry, has some questions about, would we be able to know if this is someone who was a witness who had perception, or is this like a new third category? So Investigator Norris and then Lieutenant Montgomery, with the idea that we're going to put a flag in this with the information that Board Member Owens is going to forward to Director Lee. Thanks.
I think the main problem with this section is it's mixing in two different items: informal communications and anonymous communications. And they both require different responses. I think for informal complaints, it's simple. I'm not talking about anonymous complaints, but informal complaints, communications about potential alleged misconduct, those are complaints or communications that we can easily handle as staff by simply contacting the person and explaining our process to them and letting them know that they can file and how to file a formal policy or individual complaint.
So
The anonymous complaint is a different animal, and it's just going to require a little more thought. But yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think that's one of the reasons that this has gotten more complicated, because we just threw in anonymous without a lot of thought. And I know we're close to getting that firmed up, but I think that's the challenge here.
okay, so for next week, we could, next visit meeting, we could consider then, given that, whether or not we want to split off informal complaints from an anonymous complaint section. That could be one possibility to address anonymous complaints if we're going to continue down that line. But informal complaints, do you think it's necessary, Investigator Norris, given what you described, to have a separate section describing what that means?
Either have a separate section or just have it be part of the DPA's practice. The DPA could issue a memo that for staff to do that. I mean, I'm just going back with what Kitty said about maybe we don't need all of this in these interim regulations, but I don't know. I'll give some more thought to it and work with Kitty on it.
Great, thank you. So Lieutenant Montgomery, and then I thought Board Member Owens does not have her hand raised, and then Ms. Saganor.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of call out that if we're talking about misconduct on the part of an officer, whether the person knows their name or we know their name yet, we're probably going to be able to find out their name and it could potentially result in discipline. It's going to imply all those sort of rights of the officer. It's not going to be like a policy complaint, or like sometimes when there's a police helicopter overhead for a long time, we get lots of informal complaints about that.
Yeah.
It's not general like that. As soon as we're talking about this conduct of an officer, it's going to trigger all those procedural protections, because we're not going to be too far into it before we figure out who that is, what's going on.
Okay.
In most cases, not in all, but in most cases.
Yeah, if there's like evidence of the time and the intersection and the blah, 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 all that, that makes sense. And definitely, I think everybody understands here that if there is a specific allegation of misconduct against a specific officer, that's going to trigger the due process rights that are engaged here. Everybody knows that, and we're not in agreement. But yeah, And there's a separation between that, and that's a good example. Helicopter flying overhead, making lots of noise. That could be one example of a spectrum of policy cases that would be different, that wouldn't trigger an official allegation against a specific officer, which would not trigger those type of due process rights. Thanks, Ms. Saganor.
So in the discussion, to me, anonymous means you do not know who it is who's making a complaint. And I'm hearing you say, well, it's an anonymous complaint. You know who's made the complaint, but they don't want anybody else to know. To me, that's the language there would be confidential or even secret or something like that. But I think in terms of trying to separate out the ones where you know who it is, but you're not going to tell anybody else, you might not want to use the word anonymous for those. I think anonymous is going to be, something is basically unsigned, or somebody calls, but they won't give you their name.
I see. That's helpful. So it could be like to a member of the public, which is part of what we're going through here. If they see that, you could do an anonymous complaint, they're not going to fill out their name or anything. And as Director Lee and Investigator Norris has noted, that's going to make it very difficult for them to conduct an investigation. And under the PRC, they would essentially dismiss that. I think that's relatively common amongst investigatory practices. Then there's that kind of broader subset of like the quote unquote whistleblower. That person, the whistleblower, does not come in without their name typically. They're going to have their name, but they are protected by some type of independent body, like an inspector general, that is supposed to be independent from law enforcement, for example, who then would conduct an investigation and maintain confidentiality of that person's identity. And then from there could potentially launch a formal investigation of a person or an institution inside whatever jurisdiction they have. So that's what I understand that Director Lee and Investigator Norris understand. I think it's fairly standard practice. So something that would be completely anonymous in the sense that we don't know who the complainant is at all, but they saw something really bad happen. I kind of feel like I understand that we need to carve a space out for that, but more often than that, I'm thinking that maybe that should or could fall into the more policy thing, like there's some kind of police practices problem here. I guess the issue associated with that is that there could be an individual officer who's involved, or a group of officers, that someone said they did this. I saw this on the street. I'm sending in a anonymous / confidential complaint because I don't want to be known as the quote unquote whistleblower of this practice. But then it triggers a process where there are individual officers that could have been alleged to have, to have alleged misconduct amongst individual officers, and that triggers that kind of individual rights issue, which due process rights. That I'm wondering if it goes to that, is it still okay that the complainant from the start to the intake team, to Director Lee and Investigator Norris, is unknown? To me, that's kind of one of the core questions. Are we okay with that?
I will tell you that I'm uncomfortable about somebody being 100% anonymous. And the reason why is because, somebody could just have it out for whoever and just start peppering, the PAB or whoever, some anonymous complaint about a specific officer. So I'm a little, I think for me, the terminology of anonymous versus confidential is two different people. A confidential person, we know who it is, and we haven't determined whether or not it's something where, when we pass it on to the department, whether it remains confidential. But if as long as somebody knows who that person is, with the confidentiality, I think I'm a little bit more comfortable. But the anonymous is a little, I'm not sure if I feel 100% comfortable with somebody just being able to call and say, I saw XYZ or XYZ happen. Because at that point, if they're 100% anonymous, we really don't know if they saw it. if they were there. And that was something that we have in our interim regulation, is they have to be either a witness. What's that term? I forgot what the name of that term was, but they have to be either,
Recipient witness,
yeah, they either have to be a witness or they have to be,
an aggrieved party.
yeah. But if they're anonymous, we have no way of determining whether they were. So that's why I feel uncomfortable about anonymous. I feel comfortable with confidential. I don't feel comfortable with anonymous.
That's a good marker as in terms of us thinking this out, and anonymous versus confidential, and what that means in terms of the scope of our investigatory abilities as an independent board. So I think Board Member Calavita had her hand raised, and I thought Lieutenant Montgomery did, but he's not.
So a couple of things. At the last meeting, I was asked, or we were all asked, to do a little bit more research on this with regard to what other jurisdictions do. And so I circled back to some of the places I had communicated with originally, and did look at some of their intake forms, and several of them I looked at. On the name section, they have a space declined to state. But in the process of doing this little bit of research I did, I was in communication with the chair of the Police Practices Commission down in San Diego. And he voluntarily, like on his own, volunteered that he'd be happy to speak at one of our subcommittee meetings if we would like him to come and explain how it is they can process, or how they do process, anonymous complaints, and whether at some point the anonymity is no longer preserved, and all that. And I would be happy. I mean, I actually told him I would be back in touch with him. And if we get a date for our next meeting, I think he would be very happy to speak to us.
Yeah, why don't we do that? I mean, we have the
It seems
principle.
like we're trying to reinvent the wheel here, whereas
Yeah.
a lot of people have some experience with it.
Yeah, it could potentially be like it comes in the door as anonymous, but then when it becomes formal, if there's enough information after the intake process and it becomes a formal investigation, they cannot maintain anonymity. It has to become maybe something more confidential. They may need to sign a consent form for release of their confidentiality to progress further, or they kick into that process as confidential / whistleblower. That's
The way
not-
I'm thinking about it, frankly, is that at the moment it becomes, I mean, we do a preliminary investigation and we see that there may be some validity to what's being said. And then we launch a board initiated investigation. So it's no longer relevant whether that person who initially told us something, just like with board initiated investigations, we become
Well, we're the investigatory authority that has the
Yeah.
scope to do direct.
yeah. So I frankly, and all the due process protections remain intact in those board initiated investigations. I guess I don't feel like it's quite as complicated as everybody's making it, but I might be not seeing the weeds here. So anyway, if people are okay with me inviting this guy, I'll do that.
Sure,
He's-
that makes
he's
sense.
down in San Diego.
Yeah, maybe for the next meeting. And,
Yeah.
we're talking this out. We know the kind of the requirements under due process and the principles that are going to be triggered here. I think we're starting to flesh it out more.
Yeah.
As Lieutenant Montgomery noted, like, for example, as we're investigating these two circumstances with the deaths, that's kind of like a directed investigation that we found information in the news and the board decided to investigate. But if then it turns out that an individual officer there's sufficient information that we want to raise an allegation of misconduct by individual officer, that's going to kick in the formal process, as Lieutenant Montgomery noted, and the type of POBA related structures. And of course, we would abide by that, and that's why it's there for that structure. But if it goes to like systemic policies and practices of like, don't let someone out of the sobering tank before X hours, and it's not a misconduct allegation against a specific person, but it's like a policy practice issue, then we can go that route without triggering individualized allegations. But if we need to, then that could be a possibility too. We just, down the line, we're probably going to figure out what happens when something comes in as a PAB, more like a directed investigation that we pull from the news and we decide to open it. Then it turns into an individualized allegation against an officer. We do have processes in place, but there may need to be some transitional kind of policies or practices we need to put in place to give proper flow there. Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
Mr. Chang, you said
Yeah.
that you said we're the investigative authority. Is that sort of true to the charter, or is the DPA's office the investigative group? The board, I don't believe, is the investigative authority. Am I wrong about that?
I think Kitty said that, but I think you're right, Dan. The DPA is the investigative arm or authority. Yeah,
No, I
The
didn't
board
say
itself
that.
is the quasi judicial body.
yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's
Yeah.
just that there wouldn't be an individual complainant. The quote unquote complainant would be the board, but there's not an allegation of misconduct until there's a preliminary investigation.
The
So,
board in those cases will assume the role of a complainant, but it's very limited. It's only to kick off the case. And
That's
once
what
the
we-
board formally kicks off the case, it becomes like every other regular, normal complaint that we get.
That's
There
right.
is some complexity downstream though, because the charter requires that the complainant appear at the hearing to answer questions. The officers then wouldn't have anybody to ask questions of at their hearing. So there are some due process concerns and things that fall apart in our process for due process for the officers when there's nobody to be actually the complainant.
That's something we'll certainly have to explore.
Empty chair issues.
That's something we'll have to explore the city attorney's office. It may be something that we don't have to really worry about, but I think it's something we'll have to explore.
So Lieutenant, let me ask you this question. How does the department handle this? Because I'm looking at the department's form and they allow for anonymous complaints. So if the department allows for anonymous complaint, how does the department handle it when they don't have a complaint?
So the department, that's a good question. That's a good question. Let's say we get a complaint. Typically, we're talking about serious complaints. Like for example, an anonymous complaint of discourtesy without, probably isn't going to turn into an investigation. But a serious complaint like abuse of force or something like that would, no matter what, right? So I don't know exactly how that works, other than that the department becomes the complaint is actually filed by the department. So the department looks into the issue and then is the one who files the complaint.
So
So
for me, because the department allows it,
Mhm.
why would we be any different than what the department does? If the department allows the anonymous,
Mhm.
why would we be
That's-
any different?
It's an interesting point. I think the main concern that I hear about, and I brought up last week, anonymous complaints, is the frivolous anonymous complaints, or somebody who doesn't sort of have any standing to it, or somebody who's a third party or a video witness type of complaints that could live in anonymous complaint process that's wide open.
So how does the department handle that?
Just like the DPA office probably does, they evaluate the sort of complaint and what they have to go on,
Right.
the seriousness of the complaint and whether or not they're going to move forward or not with the complaint.
Yeah. So that's what I said.
Well, I think
Last
internal affairs has, from my understanding, they have a lot of latitude in how they handle those complaints, which is different from the DPA and the PAB, because we're contemplating all these steps and processes and whatnot to deal with this. I guess, again, I would feel more comfortable if, as the investigator and the DPA, if we had that same level of leeway in handling these. But once we make them really formalized and once we make it difficult to close, I'm worried that we could get to a situation where we have a lot of frivolous complaints. So I do share those concerns of the lieutenant.
We have the process for closing those administratively. We get them now, and we have the process for closing them administratively. And from what other jurisdictions have told me, they do not get very many. But I think it's interesting what Lieutenant described, because what I had imagined was completely parallel to that. And that is that the department becomes, in lieu of, and the department sort of becomes the complainant proxy with those anonymous complaints. And that's comparable to what I have been talking about in terms of the PAB becoming, assuming that preliminary investigations suggest there's something to it and that it's not frivolous, that the PAB become the complainant in lieu of the complainant, which is what happens apparently in internal affairs. So anyway, I think we need to keep on talking about this and maybe get this Mr. Hilpert, I think his name is, from San Diego to tell us how it works down there.
Kitty, I would be interested in if you can get someone from staff also, because it sounds like the person you want to invite is on the commission or the board down there, but I would like to know how the staff deals with these complaints and these investigations. That would help me.
Right. I think this man is in the weeds, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe 2 people can come.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And I want to make sure that board member Lee, I'm sorry, Director Lee has her hand up. And then we've had a
Very
good conversation
quickly.
here. Stick
Yes.
a pin in this, and then we know the framework around what we're going to do when we re-trigger this conversation.
I just want to let everybody know that Sergeant Castle is in the meeting, and sorry to call you out, but you were here at the last meeting and not everybody was aware of it. So
Good.
Hi, thank you for joining, Sergeant Castle. And please feel free to raise your hand, during the,
Can he be made a panelist, just out of curiosity?
I was curious. About,
Yes,
he
That
could.
would be good.
yeah,
that would be great.
can we do so? I don't know. Do we need to, maybe we should ask him though.
Also, just to let everyone know, I received a response from Sergeant Russ to my email, and he said he would try to Zoom in if he could.
Okay, great. If he's okay with it, can we make him a panel?
I don't know how to, well, let's do it this way. How about if we say, raise your hand, Sergeant Castle, if you're willing to be made a panelist. Otherwise, we will. You can remain as observer.
This is exciting.
Okay, I don't see a hand. But do raise your hand anytime you want to contribute.
That's good. Yeah, he doesn't have to wait for the public comment period. Right. Okay. Board Member Calavita, your hand is still up.
Sorry.
Okay. So we're putting a pin in this, but we try to remember the structure that we just created. So then we're going to have an invitation for a speaker too, and try to go from there. And let Director Lee type that in.
Can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
Lieutenant Montgomery, can I make a request of you to maybe come back to us with more details on how IA handles the anonymous investigations, especially when it becomes to a specific officer? And then how does IA determine what's frivolous? Just maybe to give us something to put boundaries around this as well. What you guys use as boundaries, maybe it'd be appropriate for us to use this as the same boundaries, but just kind of more information specifically about how they handle this process as well.
Yeah, that's fair, because I want to be real accurate. I don't want to guess. I'm not exactly clear on all those details, so I'll get clear on that and bring it back.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I know we're going to move on. I just want to ask a quick question. Just putting the anonymous issue aside, informal communications that we're deeming informal complaints, is the board okay with them coming in and staff contacting the person, explaining our process, explaining their options to them, and then letting them decide whether they want to proceed with a formal complaint instead of bringing this to the board?
But Byron, the
What if
way
they don't want to though?
yeah,
I'm talking.
It almost
We
sounds like,
don't know that they don't want to. I mean, we do
No,
this.
I think it's fine to tell them about that, but then we need to know what to do if they say, actually, I don't want to do a formal complaint.
So if they don't, okay, okay.
we want to allow for informal complaints to be processed in some way, not just tell people they have to file a formal complaint.
I guess I'm not sure there is in between. So
So when you mean an informal complaint,
Not on a complaint form. I think we're spending too much time on this, but
But
clearly
I'm just
there's a
saying-
lot of,
We do this now. People communicate with us without following the form, and we contact them, we call them, we email them. We tell them, oh, to make this formal, you need to put this on our form. What's
so why do we have not on a complaint form?
why do we have what?
The informal complaint, an informal complaint is a communication from any member of the public, not on a complaint form. And that's what you wrote, right, Kathy?
yeah, if they put it on a complaint form, then it's a formal complaint.
Right.
Okay,
But the informal complaint in de facto doesn't exist because they might try to make an informal complaint and you now tell them that to be processed, it has to be formalized.
Yes, so they do
Yeah.
that. They do that.
Okay.
We explain to them, yeah. So
Okay.
we either
Well-
don't need this or we just need it. I don't know. I don't know if we need it here, but
unclear. We need, yeah, this is gonna need a lot more time. I think.
Well,
Totally.
just for the informal part, it's simpler than I think you guys are making it. The anonymous thing, we got to do some more work on.
No, even the informal thing is not clear because what you're telling us is they can try to file informally, but they're told that they have to make a formal complaint if they're going to complain.
If they want an investigation, they have to file a formal complaint. Yes.
Yeah.
Which we're
That's
doing
not what
now.
this says.
We do that
Then-
now all the time.
I'm just saying this document isn't clear about that.
Okay.
okay, so
Okay.
we'll make
Okay, I'll
sure,
work with Kitty on it. I'll work with Kitty on it.
yeah, that'd be helpful to kind of stipulate how you splice that. But we also we understand that informal complaints doesn't necessarily mean without a name. It could be someone,
Oh, no, usually they're
someone's name is on
with a
there.
name.
Yeah,
They're
Yeah, I
rarely
remember.
anonymous.
yeah. Okay, just want to make sure everyone is on the same
That's what I'm
page.
saying. We're dealing with two different things here. So
Right.
that's what's making this so complicated. And maybe they need to be separated out, but
Well, that, other things. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll call you, Kitty.
All right.
Okay,
Let's move on.
great, thanks.
Okay, can we go to
Okay,
the
so
top?
the top, and just a time check, we have a little bit less than an hour, 7:55.
Yeah.
So we're gonna hit 8:45 and we're gonna close off.
Can we
at
go
that.
to the very top and scratch my suggestion? I
Oh,
no longer want to make that suggestion.
okay,
Okay,
That's easy.
I'm all for that. Thank
It
you.
did make me think of something though, if I could say.
Sure.
Reading this again, I think the preamble made sense for the interim regs, but having a history like this is not really appropriate for permanent regs. I don't think we need all this stuff.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
And so, I mean, usually you would start with general provisions. If we want some sort of introductory sentence, it could be something like, these regulations are established pursuant to blah, blah, blah. But I don't think we really even need that. This, again, all this is surplusage as far as I'm concerned. And I would just call them regulations. I would have the title, Regulations of the Police Accountability Board and Office of the Director of Police Accountability. I don't think you even need, these are just the regulations of this body, right?
so just
But
to
it's
make
specific to the complaint process because
It's
you
only
can't have,
about complaints.
yeah.
But is there another body of regulations?
I don't want to give you any ideas, but there could be.
Well,
Oh, yeah, definitely could be.
but so it's going to be a separate thing. Why wouldn't it just be part of this document?
Well, it
Down
might
the
be
road.
something completely different.
Well, this just has to do with complaints. I mean, you may have regulations that pertain to
What though?
Policy review,
good one.
for example.
Okay.
But I agree with.
Right, I was just
Julie about-
noticing though, so what it says in the, second paragraph, that the board must establish rules of procedure governing the conduct of its business. Isn't that what these are?
Well, it's one type of business.
I
The
just
other-
think simpler is better, but if everybody thinks we need
No,
to.
I agree. How about if I offer to cut this down? You're right, Julie. This was, a lot of the preamble was more appropriate for the interim regs.
Okay, so can you do that when you have a chance, Dr. Lee? Just
In my spare time.
and
I
streamline
think
it.
you
Or,
could probably get rid of all of it, but.
How about just that keeping that third paragraph, little paragraph, and that'll be it?
does that sound okay, Director Lee?
I'm gonna delete it for now and reserve the right to think about it.
Okay.
I was
For the
gonna
first
suggest,
sentence, for
I
the
was
first
gonna
sentence in the
suggest-
first paragraph.
I was gonna suggest the first sentence,
Just the first sentence in the first paragraph. I do think it's too long, Julie.
the first sentence of the first paragraph.
That's all we need, right?
Only keep that.
Yeah.
That's fine
Yeah.
too.
Yep,
Like that,
yep.
And I don't know if you even need the word preamble, but if you want that.
And then keeping that last paragraph.
Are we
Okay.
keeping the last
I don't
paragraph?
think we need, it's
No.
kind of redundant. You don't need
yeah,
the
that's
last.
redundant.
No, we don't need the last one.
Measure two. Okay, measure two is already referenced because we could take that out even now that we have the first. Okay, that's good. And then
I think we can drop just say it's these regulations, blah, 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 and we can drop the approved by the voters of the city, blah,
You're-
blah, blah. Just-
yes.
Yeah, just leave section 125, period.
okay,
Yep.
Correct. Thank
Cool.
you.
great. So it just needs a period after the 5. That's not a big deal. Okay, great. Thanks for doing that.
The other comment I had, but now it's up in the air, is we have definitions, we have 7 complaint. And I was gonna say, we have, section 2 is formal complaint, and then section 4 is informal complaint. So if we keep that structure, we need to define formal complaint and define informal complaint. But maybe just make a note on 7, just that should define formal and informal complaint if those are segregated out in this
Okay.
document.
Let me put a just a comment there.
I
Potentially
would
define.
put I actually had a little tweak on the definition of complaint. I would say a declaration of potential or alleged misconduct by a sworn employee. Because some of the complaint investigations that the board is initiating are not alleged misconduct. They want to look into potential.
Sure, like the 2.
But is that a complaint yet?
That's not a complaint, yeah.
Right? We're just
Yeah,
doing
that's not
the
a complaint.
investigation.
We're doing it
Right.
like an intake. Okay, I can see that as well. So we're not doing an investigation. We're doing like a intake, for lack of a better term. to
It isn't a
determine-
complaint yet,
Yeah,
right?
it's not a formal. Okay.
If that's the case, then investigations initiated by the board probably do not belong in this set of regulations for handling complaints against officers.
Okay, so we have to think
That's why
about
we
that.
can delete, that's why, one of the reasons I don't think we need to be so specific about what these are.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I had put regulations for handling investigations and
No, I know,
complaints.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm saying if we don't specify, we don't need to tweak either of those words. We can just call them regulations.
The overall heading of the regs.
Would be just regulations of the Police Accountability Board and Office of the Director of Police Accountability.
Yeah, let's look at the name of it.
And then you add sections, and so,
I mean, I'm kind of inclined to keep the PAB initiated investigations in here. It's all in one place, unless it creates a whole lot of confusion. Because if we were to split it off, where else
Yeah.
would we put it?
Yeah,
but I get Kitty's point, it's not precise otherwise, but
It
We need
should,
to
what
rename.
about just regulations for handling complaints? Because the first
Yeah.
sentence there under preamble repeats what was there.
That's right.
Right,
Regulations for handling complaints.
I think that's fine to me.
Yes,
but, okay.
yes,
We
I'm
need
I'm trying to get us to page 2 at least.
yes, yes.
It's 8:03.
You're pretty optimistic.
We don't want to lose Officer Castle so soon.
Right.
Sergeant.
Sergeant Castle, sorry.
Okay, so aside from number 7 in the general definitions, anything else in definitions?
Yes.
I had one in
Yes,
21.
Well, let's
Okay.
let's do 14.
Let's go,
14 and
Yes.
15.
let's go in order. So
Yes.
this is a
14.
very old comment here, and I think I can delete it, but I just wanted to, I just wanted to
Right.
make the point, and I want to make sure that Board Member Calavita understands that they are, no matter what you call them, you can call them alleged misconduct hearings, but they're confidential personnel hearings in that they have all, the officers
Yes.
are afforded all the rights as personnel hearings.
Yes.
Okay, but then you had, then there were, let's see, then there were some suggestions here.
Well, I want to make sure that the hearing panel, the 3 board members impaneled, I want to try to figure out how all of this works with board investigations. And
Right.
therefore, when we talk about alleged police misconduct, the hearing panel, I thought to insert 3 board members impaneled to conduct a confidential hearing of potential or alleged police misconduct as a way to recognize that there may not be misconduct.
That
I
isn't a
think-
hearing panel, right? I mean, if we're having a hearing panel, it's alleged misconduct.
Yes,
right?
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
Right,
So the recommendation, 3 board members impaneled to conduct a confidential hearing of a complaint filed with the ODPA, that was from you, Kathy, or?
no, you added,
No, I didn't add that.
you didn't
Or-
add this?
No,
That's what this says. It says last November, you added this to contrast with number 18 below. Now the
oh,
numbers
I
have
see.
changed.
That's right. That's right. I still agree with that. Yeah.
Okay,
Because,
I think you want to contrast with the review panel, which we got rid of. So,
okay.
okay, so I don't know.
So unnecessary.
Okay, so we'll get rid of this and stay with what's up here.
Yep.
Okay,
And then I wanted to add, I'm sorry for all of this, I'm between 15 and 16. We have a definition of investigator, but I think we should add in a definition of investigation. And it would simply be the fact-finding process engaged in by the ODPA investigator.
are you deleting your proposed number
You had
2?
concerned, you had a 2.
What?
In the,
Well-
in the document we received, you had a subsection 1 and a subsection 2.
Yes, deleting 2, I'm sorry, deleting
Oh.
2.
Okay,
And simply the fact-finding process engaged in by the ODPA investigator.
and why do you think that's necessary?
Because we talk about investigations initiated by the board.
I think it should be or board, because one of the reasons that we decide we want a hearing is for further fact finding.
Right, but the ODPA does the fact finding.
Okay, because my suggestion was going to be by the ODPA investigator or board, but I hear what you're saying. Because it says further fact finding, and that's something that I think we need to clarify what that means and who does it. What if anyway.
Well, the investigation itself is done by the investigator. And I just wanted it clear that, I mean, since we define everything else, nowhere do we find investigation. I think it's useful to
Yeah.
talk about the fact-finding process.
That's fine. I had something on 21 unless there's something before 21.
What about 14?
Informal
Oh.
hearing.
Adding the definition.
Oh. What informal?
We shouldn't limit it to ODPA investigator,
What should
Perhaps-
we say?
ODPA staff,
Staff. Yeah.
Staff.
because it could include the director, other people. I
Right.
mean, we don't want to limit it.
Good point.
But it doesn't really say what it is. It just says who's doing it. So I'm still not sure if this definition is needed, but
Yeah.
I think when we're ready to move on, I think we also may need to put what's preponderance of the evidence here.
What did we decide on 14?
Oh, we're on 14?
What informal hearings are we talking about?
I don't know.
I don't know. I wrote this at the last meeting.
I think we should get rid of it.
Yes.
Yeah, unless something else pops up.
I don't
Yeah.
remember what that was about.
That's not tied to.
You know
informal
what? Maybe I
complaint?
meant informal complaint.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're tying it to that section that, with the informal complaint, I think.
So that's something
Yes,
we'll
yes,
revisit.
yes, it was informal complaint.
Okay.
And I didn't write a definition because it would have just repeated what was,
And if we have it, it should go up above, right below complaint, formal complaint, right?
Yeah, but we're not going to put it in now. Right?
Yeah, let's just,
okay, so now we're gonna delete it.
yes.
Yeah.
So what I was saying was, I think we need definition of preponderance of the evidence.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
not
we have the
defined-
definition elsewhere, but I don't think it.
Yeah,
hurts
it's not
to have it.
defined below.
I don't, well,
It
maybe I missed
is.
it. Is it?
Oh, maybe I'm just thinking of for the hearing panel, it's
Yes.
defined. You're right. I think you're right that we
I
should.
mean, I looked
define
through the
it.
regs. If I missed it, let me know, but I didn't see it. And
And we do have the definition in the packet that goes to the hearing panel.
yes, and we can,
So,
we'll
yeah.
insert, if you guys agree, we'll insert that for the next meeting. Because we do.
And we do use the term in these regs somewhere.
oh,
I think so.
Yes.
Let's see.
Yes,
I'm sure we do.
yes, we do. I'm sure we do too.
It's in section E. E2. Page 8.
Okay, it's there then. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good call.
So let's add preponderance of the evidence to the definitions and then use the same one that's in the
Right.
hearing packet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's good, 18, and then anything else down? And board member Leftwich, you have your hand up still.
Well, I had something on 21.
Okay. So 18, 19 looks okay.
Oh, can
Was that-
we, let's see, where are you? 18, 19?
20 is about tolling.
I
Yeah.
don't like 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
What changes do you recommend?
Well, you know what? I may have to get back to you on that. I'm just reading it. It's just choppy. I don't know if it makes sense to a lay
It's
person.
choppy. Do we need it? Do we need to define tolling?
I think it probably, because we use it in various places throughout this document, I think.
Well,
Sure
can
you-
we just say suspend the counting of days against the time periods?
against the,
Suspends the time periods.
I want to add a suspends the.
Can we
Suspends
say
the
tolling
timeframe.
rather than tolling? Does that make it any more easier to read?
Tolling.
Yeah.
So I think so.
Well,
ING.
No, I think we use toll more than
That's
tolling.
not the problem. I don't,
That's not the, yeah, and that's not the problem.
You could do toll/tolling.
No,
no,
Want to do toll? Okay. All right,
sorry.
so suspension of toll means suspension of the, there's another word than counting of days in the phrase.
Did anybody look it up? There's probably just a,
It might be an online.
I could,
why not just suspend the counting of days? Isn't that fine?
It's not clear enough, I think, to particularly lay people.
To stop the running of a time period.
Stop the
That one.
running of the, yeah,
Okay,
that?
suspension, stopping,
stop the
Suspension.
running.
To
Stop
stop
the-
the running of a time period.
do you think stop is more appropriate than
Yeah.
suspension? Because
Yeah.
I don't know.
suspension means it'll continue again later on.
To suspend the running of a time period?
Or can we just say suspension of the running of a time period?
How about just suspension of time period?
Suspension of time period?
Tolling is a legal doctrine that allows for the pausing or delaying of the running of the period of time set forth by statute of limitations. Well,
Pausing could be
pausing or
fine too.
delaying. Pausing. I
Suspension
don't
of
know.
suspension of period of time. I like part of that, Julie.
Suspension of a period
Pausing.
of time.
Pausing.
Suspension of period of time or time period.
Suspension of time period. Why isn't that enough?
I like that.
It could be.
Let's just do that.
Why don't we do that for now?
Required
And then
time
if
period.
somebody,
Yes, we could do that for now.
let's do it
Sure.
for now and.
Sure, suspension of
spend
time
more
period,
time on it.
suspension of required time periods, something like that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
Kid has her hand.
I just wanted to mention, I was the one who wanted this put in here because I had not heard that term
Ah.
until I came across this, until it was in this document. And the reason I used is the word count. It was sort of like, well, from context, that's what I figured out, because the word toll in here is used when it's like, and the 60 days or the 90 days or 180 days or whatever. So it's specifically used in terms of you're going to count how many days until such and such, and then you'll start the clock running again. So I'm not wedded to the language I suggested, but when there's another suggestion for it, what I'd like to do is go and look at the places where the word toll is
Right.
used and say, okay, if I looked up, said toll, what does that mean? And then looked at this definition, would it
Yeah.
really
Make sure it aligns, yeah.
critically help?
That makes sense.
Okay. So Ms. Aguilar, do you mind checking that? And then next time we'll have
Yeah.
a conversation, make sure.
I will do. So what is it? What is the language being suggested now? Just suspension of the
Suspension
time period?
Yeah,
Okay. Thanks.
That's not really enough, I don't think.
I don't think so.
yeah, we may need to add a phrase again after that. Okay, so it's at 8:16, we have 30 minutes. So we want to make sure we get through page 2.
Are
Witness
we
officer,
told?
I want to answer, Kitty, did you see my answer to your question here?
does,
You asked, does a witness officer have to be an eyewitness? The short answer is no.
Well,
Where are you?
I have a suggestion about 21.
Okay,
So what my suggestion is that we say a sworn employee of the Berkeley Police Department, comma, other than the subject officer who either witnessed the events described in a complaint or has relevant personal knowledge of those events. Because personal knowledge could be, yeah, over the water cooler, he said it happened. So personal knowledge. Anyway.
Can
so
you
can you
say
say-
that
say it
again?
again?
So what I said was, a sworn employee of the Berkeley Police Department, comma, other than the subject officer, comma,
Yeah,
Other than
who
the
either
subject.
witnessed the events described in the complaint or has relevant personal knowledge of those events.
I think that's perfect.
Okay, that sounds good. Who either witnessed the events
Described in the complaint.
described in the complaint or has
Relevant personal knowledge of those events.
relevant personal knowledge of.
I don't think you need the word either. Just say or witnessed,
Right.
or who witnessed or.
Who witnessed to describe, yeah, to witness the events described in the complaint, or has relevant personal knowledge of events described
Those events. Of
of
those
those
events.
events.
Kathy, do you
Those events,
recall,
period.
Kathy,
Period. Oh,
do you recall we interviewed, and it's not often, I think we interviewed a captain or lieutenant about, it was for a case, and they didn't have personal knowledge of the incident, but they had, we were relying on their professional knowledge and position to just get some background information regarding a particular practice or procedure. And I'm just wondering, would that limit us here?
Isn't that the
Yes,
duty command officer?
Well,
Yeah.
no, that the duty command officer is defined somewhere else and has a different role. They're not part of the case at all. But it doesn't happen often, but I know that we have investigated someone in the department to get just some important background information.
It doesn't sound like a witness officer, though.
Right,
That would be
I don't think
something
so
else.
either.
Well, maybe we need another definition then, but we
Yeah,
always,
sounds like a subject matter expert.
Right.
Is that?
yeah.
And Kitty, you need the word events at the end of that sentence.
Oh,
End of what sentence?
Right. there,
oh,
you
she
just-
meant me.
Oh, you meant Kathy. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I knew she was talking to me
Somebody whose name begins with a K.
and ends with a Y.
Right. Yeah, I think if we're talking about witnesses, it ought to be someone who's got more personal knowledge rather than just subject area knowledge.
okay, good.
No,
And-
that's right. Oh, that's a good point. We don't need to define that. Okay.
I think we might get past page 3.
All right, look at that. We're scrolling up. There should be
No
bells and
comments
whistles.
here.
Nothing on 3 or 4.
Whoa, flying through it.
No. I don't have anything till 6, personally.
Okay, here we go.
I'm okay with that, Kathy, as long as you are. So you're the expert on this stuff.
5 days notice. Okay.
Yeah.
The complainant to be allowed at least 5 days notice. And then I said, I don't see a conflict. Okay, so you're okay with it. Let's say, okay.
Okay.
Whoops. Well, okay, I obviously did not do what I was trying to do. All right,
Okay.
this is something staff wants to insert. Just to,
Mediation.
the document has a name.
Yeah,
Okay,
good.
Okay, that's good.
okay, here's
This-
a bunch
yeah.
of things from your staff.
Okay.
The first thing is to make this 30 days, just because Byron, what was this discussion about?
I just thought the 28 days just looked odd to the public, because when we write these, I'm not just thinking about us, I'm thinking about how the public reads this and officers as well. And it's just 30 days, everyone knows what 30 days is, it's a month.
Right,
But 28 days raises the question, why 28 days?
okay,
That's
Right.
good.
You know,
right. Okay, so the other things we added here are, okay, so this is the notice of complaint and allegations. So this is when the officer, a subject officer is first advised that there's a complaint filed against him. And then, of course, they have a right to know what is the complaint about. So there are, in cases where it doesn't go straight from the filing to the notice, such as where we would bring it to you for administrative closure before filing a notice, or where there was a request for mediation, but the officer didn't want to mediate, or somebody changes their mind. In those situations, the notice hasn't been issued yet. And we just need a place to make sure that it's done and put that timeline in there.
Okay.
So that's
Looks
what
good.
that is.
Yeah, looks fine. Within 30 days.
Right, within 30 days. Well, it used to just say within 30 days of complaint filing. But sometimes a complaint is filed and we think there's no there, so we bring it for admin closure.
Right.
We still haven't issued the notice of complaint, and it could be more than 30 days. It could take more than 30 days to get it through the admin closure process. So we want to make sure that we're not violating anything. And similarly, it's very rare, but just in case, when a complainant files and says, I don't think I need an investigation, I'd like to have a mediation and sit down and chat with the officer, then the mediation only happens once the complainant requests, if the officer also agrees to mediation. In a rare case where the officer doesn't, and there's certain timeframes that they have to do that. But if we're past the 30-day period, we don't want to be found out of compliance with the regs. So we just want to give ourselves the necessary time for this administrative process to work out.
Okay. I mean, I like the language. I don't know what others, but I'm fine with it. Is there an issue that others?
I just had an issue with the last part of 3.
Okay.
This part? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're not there yet. Okay, so
Okay.
this is fine with everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is that thorny issue that has been raised. It was practice under the PRC for years and years and years and years. And it's not written in the regs. We've gotten some feedback from certain representatives that we don't have a right to do this. So I want to make sure it's written in.
I think you have a right to do it. I just think this sounds like it could be, when it says that staff may add, modify, or remove allegations as they deem appropriate, that sounds like it could be kind of arbitrary and vague. And I know why you do it, and I think it's appropriate, but I think the language needs to be clarified. And it seems like you do it like you're recognizing that complainants may be unfamiliar with the types of allegations. I mean, basically you have a complainant who perhaps is unsophisticated, right? And so they're filling out these forms and they don't know. And you guys look at it and you go, well, there is a there, but it's really this.
Sure.
And also it's like by if you say remove, what if I have like an excessive use of force is my claim, and then I see that you just took it out, and I know you give them notice, but there's no consent requirement, so I'm not sure you necessarily need the complainant's consent. But I just feel like we need something in here to justify, to explain why it would be appropriate.
I guess we could, like, in terms of cleaning up that language, could be to remove allegations as appropriate per procedures, something like that. Because your procedures are what allow you to determine whether or not an allegation should or shouldn't be open. And you can restructure the language from a factual allegation to a legal allegation, or a factual assertion of an issue of concern, and you convert that into a legal allegation that can be properly investigated. I don't know how you would describe that process, but just would it be the as appropriate based upon procedures?
It isn't just
No,
procedures. It
I
could
don't
be
think-
substantive.
Right, I thought that's what
Practices?
Julie was getting at, which was to somehow tie it to whatever facts are revealed or discovered, or as supported by the facts or not.
Right. Maybe,
Yeah.
Remove allegations as supported by the facts.
but even
Well-
then, it's like they might say, hey, I say it is. I don't know. It's just kind of slippery.
I think you should leave it up to staff, whatever staff that is. I think you should trust them. I mean, there's a number of reasons why we revise allegations. It's not always because the complainant may not understand what the proper allegations are. As we work our way through an investigation, we may add or drop allegations. One example is if we get enough evidence during our investigation that there is just zero evidence to support that allegation against the officer, well, we might drop it. Or we may find something else in the course of investigation to justify bringing forward an additional allegation against the officer. But that's why you trust your professional staff.
I
Byron,
know.
we trust you. It's not about us trusting you. It's about the complainant and the subject officers perhaps wondering why it changed, or, how you have the right to change it, or.
Well, to be
And
honest,
you won't be here, unfortunately, and Kathy won't be here. And so it's like, these need to be written so that whoever picks this up has guidance, and
Yeah.
whoever reads it kind of gets it. And it's like, obviously you guys have done a fantastic job and we trust you and we get it, but it's not clear enough here, I don't think.
So can we require that when staff makes these changes, that they can make these changes, but there has to be some narrative behind why the changes were made? And it could be just a short one little paragraph,
So-
blah, blah, blah. But then that
That is-
way everybody sees why those changes were made.
Wait, and who's gonna get that narrative?
I
So
think
would-
everybody should get that narrative. I think the complainant should get it so they know why the complaint was
Yeah.
changed. I think the board should get it. And I think the officer should get it. I think everybody would be helpful for everybody to know why it was changed.
Because
Well-
this happened at our hearing on Monday and the officer was quite upset, and I can understand how they'd be upset. It's like, where did this come from? The
Wait,
complainant wasn't complaining.
wait. They get notice of it. They don't come into the hearing and see allegations for the first time.
No, I'm saying, but they don't understand why. So I like Cheryl's idea about maybe some explanation, or I don't know, or at least language that explains why, the potential circumstances.
I don't think this is a problem. I think what you're suggesting is going to make it a huge problem from our side of it. We've been doing this for decades, and I know
But
this.
Byron, you're not going to be doing it. You're not going to be doing
No,
it.
I understand that, and there were people doing it before I got here. But I'm open to suggestions, but I just don't know how this can work.
So Byron, explain to me why you think adding a short paragraph or something explaining why staff made changes to a complaint, what would be the issue with adding that?
Because then we're going through, then we're into another process of defending and explaining that process, and we're not investigating. Now we're down this whole other track, either with the officer or the complainant, and perhaps even the board. I don't know, but I just think it's unnecessarily going to complicate this process, and it hasn't really been an issue. It hasn't. It's come up recently, and I talked to you, Julie, about why I thought it came up recently. I gave you my personal thoughts on that, but this is something
I'm just reading the language, and even, I gotta tell you, even before this happened recently, when I looked at this language, this was one of the things I flagged as something that's vague, even though I get it. I just think the language isn't adequate.
So let me just interject here really quickly. Number one, Ms. Saginaw has her hand up too, but it's okay. So everybody is on the same page on this. A complaint comes in the door, and then an investigator reviews it to determine sufficiency for preponderance of evidence. I'm just describing to you what happens in my context.
No, prima
So-
facie case.
Right. So it hasn't hit a case yet. So in a typical kind of intake process, it comes in as a complaint, and then there's a determination of sufficiency of facts. and I'm sorry, I misspoke, not preponderance of evidence, that if true, if the allegation were true and it would be a violation, then you open it up and you follow the facts to see if in fact the facts do reveal that the allegation was true. But then in that process, in that intake process, you also send a letter stating we've accepted number 1, 2, 3, but not 4 and 5. And we didn't accept number 4 and 5 because of these reasons. That's kind of a standard practice. And then it goes out to the complainant. Some agencies or institutions or investigatory bodies will send it to the alleged quote unquote bad actor. Or they might just send what's opened as an allegation and not even provide notice of what was not opened. So what you guys do is, can you explain that a little bit so we are on the same page here? You do send out an allegation and notification of stuff so everyone knows, and it's part of due process, but you don't necessarily list all the stuff that you decided not to take. You went through the whole process, conducted an interview and said, okay, this is what we're going to investigate. But you don't say we dismiss this factual assertion you made, or that it doesn't rise to the level of whatever sufficiency or potential preponderance.
That's
Okay.
right.
So we're kind of getting at the point where we're saying that there's a suggestion that kind of the versions that I'm accustomed to is that you would then list, well, you asserted these other issues of concern, but we're not going to open them for this reason. Do you think that's something that would be appropriate to the practice that you have so far? I mean, it does take a little bit more time. And I think it's probably easier if the investigator has more discretion over it. In this particular case, because we're a independent, a body, it's going to go to the board. And I guess you would have to go through an additional layer there, which adds, some more process. But it could go towards the issue of transparency.
Wait, these don't go to the board.
I'm talking about so at the front end, with regard to what you open, you do go to the board, right?
No. They
Well,
only
it
go
goes to the hearing panel.
I'm sorry, the hearing, that's what I meant. I apologize. I'm using the wrong terminology.
You
The hearing panel.
You don't get the allegations, the final allegations, until the DPA presents under this current process her findings and recommendations to you all.
Yeah. So I mean by the board, the hearing panel, but the hearing panel, they don't get.
Well, there may be no hearing panel yet, but the first time that you all will see this is at a findings and recommendation stage, where you will determine if a hearing is warranted.
That's right. So
I still think we should know that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complaints, that the staff looked at it and determined that complaint 1 and 2 was really related to X. Complaint 3 was, not, you didn't find any merit to it, so you just removed it. And then you were going forward 4 and 5. I think that the staff should say that when they bring it to us. I do. Because what happens with the complainant? The complainant has put down on a piece of paper, here's all these 5 things. And then when they go to, let's say we go to a hearing panel or whatever, they see the complaint and now it's something totally different than they actually did. Then they're kind of wondering, well, what happened to my original complaint? And they got no explanation as to why those other things changed.
Do you guys explain it at all?
They get explanation if and when they ask. I will tell you, we've been pretty good at getting to the meat of the allegations that are presented. The complaint form itself tells them that staff will make the final determination as to what allegations will go forward. And we will explain that to them as well.
So that's helpful. I understand the prior practice. Sorry for mixing up the terminology too, confusing everybody. But I kind of feel, as board member Owens does, that when someone files a complaint, and oftentimes they're factual assertions, must be discriminatory, this must be a violation of my rights, or this and this happened. It's helpful for them to see that you accepted this and you did not accept these others for these reasons based upon your case processing procedures. Maybe one issue is there sufficient clarity in the case processing procedures for you to say, like, okay, aside from some of the administrative dismissals that you have, is there further specificity that might be necessary for you then to cover the spectrum of the reasons why, at your discretion, you might decide something's not appropriate to be investigated and you dismiss it, and to list that?
Or you add, conversely, for the officer, you added stuff against me. That person didn't complain, and you've added things. So the officer especially would like to know why.
Yeah. I know it adds an additional layer, but in a lot of ways, if it's in your discretion, it gives you more authority in that sense of reviewing the facts and going through that process as a professional investigator to make that decision. And then you provide notice to the officer and to the complainants, and it provides transparency throughout the whole process.
Well, we have always advised them what allegations are being brought, first of all. And then as the investigation proceeds, if we find it's necessary to add, drop, or modify, we do that and we notify the complainant and the subject officer.
When you notify the complainant subject officer, is there like a language regarding what the basis for the quote
No,
unquote dismissal of it? Okay. That's the part that I'm thinking that, and I think board member Owens and board member Leftwich are pushing at. I think for modern standards, I'm not saying you guys did anything wrong, because that's how it was done. But for a lot of the standards I'm seeing, there's a very transparent discussion of why exactly your particular factual assertion, and you'll name the assertion and try to convert it into an allegation and say that just doesn't amount to something that we can investigate for X reason. But another issue could be that you might need more robust range of dismissal codes, if that's at all an issue.
I didn't understand that last, more robust range of what?
Dismissal bases.
Like
They
the
already
grounds
can-
that you're,
The grounds for your dismissals, like literally like, 101, 108.b, whatever, is because the facts you presented, were not coherent enough.
I mean,
There's-
usually it's it's like our investigation, does not reveal any facts in support of this allegation.
Right.
Would that be
What's wrong with-
sufficient?
So, yeah,
That's-
yeah.
That's one of
that's
them.
fine.
That some places will splice it even further to give investigators more scope of authority in their discretion to say that these are reasons why we want to kind of control. It's not closing the gates, but controlling the gatekeeping so that you can focus on cases that have merit, while having very specifically defined codes for dismissing some allegations.
But I think, Kathy, what you just said would be fine, that the facts don't support your allegations, or just something. And then when you're adding something,
Yeah, at a
something
minimum.
similar, it doesn't need to be lengthy, but just, something.
I guess that might be more manageable. It
Over-
just
Yeah. over time, it will probably become boilerplate, actually.
Yeah, you
Right.
get boilerplate.
Right.
And hopefully you have appropriate, you need more than just the two of you guys doing the investigations. I mean, I think you need probably double, but that's another.
And I didn't look at the complaint form again, but and I think it's important that it be really clear on the complaint form too. And it sounds like it is, that, be advised that it may change based on our review and analysis.
It seems to me that this is more detailed than necessary in the regulations. It seems to me that that's something, huh?
I guess, I think a total stranger picks this up, or 10 years from now, there's totally new people, they pick it up.
Right, but
There's
how would
nothing
we,
in here saying that they have to, including some explanation.
okay,
So
so,
it sounds like it's just up to them totally, and it
Right.
could be arbitrary, and we just want to make it clear that it isn't. So I think it'd be good to add a little something, so that if a new person picks
what
it
if we
up.
said as they deem legally appropriate? Instead of just as they deem appropriate. I'm just trying to tweak this language some.
Yeah,
Where would you put,
I'm fine with the language. I would like to add in something that the staff has to say what they added, removed, changed, and why. And it doesn't have to be, a 10-page description
Right.
of why they did it. It's just like somebody said, I mean, it could just be a boilerplate, it doesn't meet the standard, or
And where-
whatever it is.
But
And
where would we put that in this reg? I'm not contesting
Maybe
it.
it
I
could
think
go as a new last sentence under 3.
Yeah,
Well, the
And
last
shall,
the last-
Or right here, not the last sentence,
Not the
Yeah.
last sentence. The last
right
sentence is
before,
already-
right before
Right.
the last sentence.
right.
And what would it say? I can't read that. I'm sorry.
I haven't written anything. I was
Oh, I-
waiting for, somebody was speaking.
it is, Board Member Owens and Leftwich, do you want to take a stab at some language?
Do we want to come back? to that?
Maybe like the revised notice of allegation shall briefly, I don't know. I can't think of something now, but maybe just
Sure.
put a note in.
Placeholder there.
A placeholder, yeah.
Explanations shall be provided for any such modifications.
Yes, that's good. Something like that. Explanations shall be provided for any such modifications, or, but we don't use that language here, but like explanations should be provided for dismissals of factual allegations.
modification includes
Modifications
dismissal.
is more general. It's
Yeah.
not just dismissals.
Yeah, it's all of
Explanations shall be provided
Yeah.
It said
to
changes.
Any changes?
complainants, subject officer.
No, that, it's going to them, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
let's
that's
just leave it
redundant.
here for now and we'll,
Okay,
I
something
just
like,
think
yeah,
explanations shall be provided for any such modifications for
okay,
now.
that sounds good. And Ms. Agnor has her hand up.
Brief explanations should be provided.
yeah, I
Yes,
agree.
yes.
Brief
Brief
is-
explanation,
brief
sure.
is-
It's just not.
Yeah, and honestly, if this is put in practice, it does, as Board Member Calavita knows, it just becomes boilerplate. And as probably Investigator Norris and Director Lee they have a whole bunch of boilerplate templates for kind of plug in with sets of facts, and that's the way it should be. As you progress, you're going to develop new boilerplate language and like model legal language and procedural language. They just plop right in there for different sets of facts. So it's 8:45 right now. So how about we go for 5 more minutes and then we take a break, so we have more meetings coming up. We don't want to burn out. Does everyone agree with that? So we're partway through page 3 already. Or page 6,
Page
actually.
6, woohoo.
Can we
Yeah.
take a look at the next issue and see how hefty it is? And then maybe take care of that and try to finish within 5 minutes.
I think Kit's substitute language, the first alternative she gives is a good one for number 6.
Okay, let's take a look at number 6 again. Can you roll up? Are we on number 6?
Well, here we are.
Oh, there. Okay. Yeah, I thought the substitute language looked good as well.
So the first
The first
option-
one?
The
Okay,
first alternative, yeah.
okay.
And then I like,
What
Oh,
happened?
the 6 just disappeared.
Okay,
Did you see that? Okay, good. There's that.
I know
And then,
Kathy, you don't like and or, but I think and or fits under C.
why not or?
Um,
Why not
Because-
and?
Because and makes it look like they have to agree.
Oh.
And that's the reason I like and or, because it's inclusive and makes it clear that either one can do it.
Yeah,
I
And
think, I
they
think,
could do it together or separately.
well, or doesn't preclude doing them together.
What does the charter say about this? Who can do it?
The charter, I looked at this closely. The charter uses the phrase "and" in one place, and it says it much like this. But in a different place in the charter, it makes it very clear that the board may issue subpoenas without reference to the director.
So then it sounds like and or.
That's what I think.
and or is fine.
I don't see any problem with and or.
I'm okay with it too. Kathy, I know you're uncomfortable with
It's
that
all right. It's, I could live with it.
in limited circumstances. Sure. Okay, and then and then how about the purple language? Everybody okay with that? Like Kitty, including but not limited to photographic, audio, and video evidence?
Wait, we're under complaint investigation?
We're under C.
6C and
It's 2AC, right?
No.
Is it 2AC? No, I'm
we're
sorry,
6C.
2C.
2C. 2C.
oh, I'm sorry, big two, yeah.
So this is under complaint investigation. And why would the board issue subpoenas? Because the DPA is handling the investigations.
That's something that I think we need to talk about later too, because it says that we may investigate and we may hold hearings, decide a hearings necessary for further fact finding. So something's
Yeah,
happening.
but
right?
Measure II contemplates, at least per my read, the DPA's investigative arm, your investigative agency. And then we get into these interim regs and we're dealing with the complaint investigation. So we're dealing with the DPA's handling of this investigation at its right. So I don't know, we need to have the PAB there.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So,
Well, where would it go though? I mean, if,
The PAB can, obviously for policy investigations and, but I just don't know. I don't know where else it would go, but I'm just not sure it should be here because it's confusing the roles.
suppose the hearing panel, if there is a hearing panel, suppose the hearing panel feels that they need some books, papers, documents, whatever, at the hearing panel level. We would want to be able to subpoena those things as a hearing panel.
Would you do that or would you direct the director to do that? And also, would you do that at the completion of an investigation? We got to look at.
We might though. What if
During
there
the
was
hearing-
some witness?
Not
that you-
might, can we? First of all, can we extend the investigative gathering of the facts and evidence further? That's the first question I have.
I say yes, because it says further fact finding. What's the point of further fact finding if we don't have any instruments with which to find?
Wait, you're
facts?
looking in these internal regs, these proposed permanent regs. And I guess we have to make sure we're in sync with this Measure II.
No, Measure II says for further fact finding, right?
I don't know.
Measure II also says that these things happen within 60 days after the completion of the investigation.
What things happen? The subpoena?
The bringing it to the board, that's the beginning of 18I.
What if a certain witness wasn't interviewed that we find crucial? Too late?
I think that's a good question.
But also the charter amendment does talk about having a hearing panel if there's the need for, isn't there?
Further fact finding, I thought.
Well, the fact finding would be the testimony from, because that's
Right.
going to happen at the hearing. But just gathering evidence, I'm just not sure.
I don't know.
It may be,
It doesn't make sense to me to say that once the investigation's closed, that's it. You can't look at anything else.
well, it's not anything. You obviously are going to be taking testimony.
No, but I mean, any new witnesses, new documents.
I'm not saying you can't, I'm just not sure we can, if we could find it. I just want to make sure we're not confusing what the Measure II contemplates with what we're putting in these regs. We have to be in sync.
Right, and they might not have contemplated this at all. They might not have, there's no way they could have thought through all the scenarios.
Yeah. So
It seems to me that we can put, so under letter I is the hearing procedures. And it seems to me that that is the place to put our ability to subpoena witnesses, people, or documents under the hearing procedures. It's page 14.
Yeah. There's nothing there.
There's nothing there, but that's where I think Byron is absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so here under this section that we're looking at now, maybe we do talk about the director subpoenaing things in that phase, and then later under the hearing procedures, talk about the ability of the
board,
the hearing panel or the board to do those subpoenas if there's some crucial piece of evidence that we want to consider.
but I think we'll have to, I think we'll have to look into that further to see if what the board's ability is to extend the investigation. And that's the question I have. But I
When would
think,
we do it though? Because if we're relying on staff, we wouldn't even get it in time to do the subpoena, right? We're not focusing on it until there's the hearing.
I mean, that's the whole point of this whole system they set up. I mean, they established the DP as your investigative arm and gave them some money to do that. And then you all come in and do this other step. But then you coming in and doing this other thing.
But why give us subpoena power? I'm just not sure.
Well, because you could be doing policy investigations, you could be doing broader investigations into the department that have nothing to do with individual formal complaints.
Okay, so
I don't think the charter allows us to extend this process. I think the charter allows for staff to do the investigation, and the board does a hearing if necessary. I think you take the information you get from the hearing packet, the testimony, and any other thing you get from the hearing, and then the board makes a decision. I don't think the charter allows for anything outside of that. And I think Byron's comment about the subpoena related to policies and all that other stuff, I think that's where that falls in. I don't think we would subpoena anybody to the hearing. I think that that's something staff would do as part of the whole investigation and setting up the hearing. I think that's where staff steps in. I don't think the board would do that. That's just from reading the charter, and that's in, I think it's 19I, and then the next thing they say after, the hearing is within 15 days, you affirm, modify, or reject. So there's nothing in between there that says that the board has time to do any other additional investigation. I think once the investigation is done by staff, then the board does their hearing if necessary or appropriate. And then it's 15 days, the hearing panel either agrees with staff or modifies exit. That's the way I read in the charter.
Okay, and then, so thanks, Board Member Owens, and Board Member Sagnor.
There's a section in the charter, I just want to read this. So this is listed under Police Accountability Board Powers and Duties, right?
Yeah.
And there's, it's, A, and it says, the Police Accountability Board has the following powers and duties.
Very beginning.
What section are you reading?
The very beginning.
It's near the beginning, it's on the second page, number three. Number 3, Police Accountability Board Powers and Duties. A, the Police Accountability Board's powers and has the following powers and duties, and it has a list of powers and duties. Okay, and number 5 says to access records of city departments, compel attendance of sworn employees of the police department, and exercise the power of subpoena as necessary to carry out its functions. So I think the argument being made by Investigator Norris is that, in fact, there would not be a case where this would be necessary for the board to carry out its functions. So that's what you're really arguing. The charter is really kind of broad in giving the board that power as necessary. It doesn't say that it only has that power in a particular circumstance. And then then, so I think the other part that's important there is just above that, number 3. So we're still on main section 3A, the list of powers and duties. Number 3, to receive and consider the findings and recommendations of the Director of Police Accountability regarding complaints filed by members of the public against sworn employees of the police department, and to recommend if discipline is warranted, et cetera. So then really this hinges on what's the definition of what the process of consider is. Now we're defining a process for here's how the board will go about considering that, right? But the charter itself doesn't define that process of how the board would go about considering a recommendation. So it seems to me possible that if the board feels like in order to consider the recommendation, they need more information, then at least under this charter, they would have the power to subpoena. So you may not want to put it that way in the regulations that we're writing, but I think the charter does in fact give that broad power. Thank you.
And I saw those provisions, Kit, and the challenge for me is it gives these broad powers, and then it goes on when it gets to the complaint process under 18, section 18, it gets more specific about what's supposed to happen. And again, I don't know if I'm 100% right or you're right. I just think it's something that we need clarity on. I'm still leaning towards they have separate roles when it comes to complaint investigations, but it may be something we have to get clarity on.
And it could also be, and it
I
could
was just
also,
going to say what we can do is draft it the way we think it should be.
right.
And then, the city council will consider it. And if they say that's beyond your powers, but this has already come up. I know this idea that we need more investigation, and it didn't seem right that we can't do anything. So anyway.
So before we take it to city council, why don't we have staff discuss it with the city attorney's office and find out, here's the challenge. This is what we think, as a subcommittee, this is something we got hung up on, and get some direction from the city attorney's office as to what they think this charter is saying.
Well, the problem with the charter is it's not well written. I mean, it's internally inconsistent. It's not well written. So we could do that, but also we can read it ourselves and say,
Right.
this is the way we think these regulations should state this. Maybe the city attorney will say you can't do it, or the city council will say, yeah, that sounds right. We didn't think about that. So I don't think we necessarily need the city attorney's permission to draft them in a way that has some.
Yeah, I agree with that. We do have a scope of authority as the regs committee of the PAB to interpret the charter language. It does mean if we think that is a big enough issue that there's a possibility a city attorney might think that we overextended our authority, then they would engage with us, but we might want to flag it for them. That's one consideration. But I don't want to totally cabin our regulations authority in interpreting the charter. And here it does seem like it could suggest one way, whereas there's a potential discrepancy, as Investigator Norris pointed, starting in complaints.
I think this is a very important question, because we are all, you in particular, again, as I said to my driven Kathy crazy, it's 1973 again, when the PRC got started. It's very important that we clarify things and get things straight as we move forward, because these are the procedures that are going to be in place for a long time. And we want to make sure it's right and everyone's on the same page. And this is an important question. I think it's worthy of a city attorney to look at it. And we shouldn't assume the worst because we're going to ask our city attorney. The city attorney works for the city council too.
I was going to say, I think the council will ask the city attorney if we don't.
Right, I think city attorney is going to look at all of this, whether we ask.
So why don't we just ask the city attorney up front versus putting it in front of.
I just don't know if it's necessary, because they're going to look at all of it anyway.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, why take it to council, and council is going to go to city attorney? So why don't we just remove that from us to council, council to city attorney, and just take it to the city attorney. It'll answer the question for us. It'll answer the question for the council, and then we know how to proceed versus let's just run forward with this thing and make an assumption about it. And then it gets to council and council says, no, I need to have a city attorney review it. Why don't we just have them review it up front? I don't understand what's the problem with having them review it up front.
So we can ask, basically what we would be asking, Cheryl, is the interpretation of the charter in section 3, subsection 5, 3A5, in terms of access to
Does that extend to the complaint investigative process? Those
What's that?
powers, right? Those powers that Kit mentioned, the powers of the board, the section 5, I think it was, and section 3, does that extend to complaint in specific to subpoena power and investigative authority? Does it extend to the complaint? What is the board's role?
So
powers.
No, I don't want to ask I would like to ask how the city attorney interprets this 3A5 when it talks about compelling attendance of sworn employees and accessing records and the power of subpoena as necessary to carry out its functions. Does that include a hearing panel? Or is that excluded because all investigation needs to halt after the investigating staff has done its job? In other words, does this subpoena power, I mean, I think it's a simple question. Does the subpoena power extend to the PAB during its hearing?
Well, is the question really related to can the PAB extend the hearing? Because if the staff has done the investigation, they give us the hearing packet, they make a recommendation. We as a board determine, yes, we want to have a hearing. And then at that point, are you saying the PAB is going to potentially subpoena additional people? Because the staff has already done their investigation.
What if they missed a witness? What if, say, there was somebody, we look at it and go, did you ever talk to so-and-so? And they said, no, we never talked to that person. What if it's somebody that the board thinks is really crucial?
And I would just want to bring up that the real authority here, right, in the charter was the voters, right? The charter amendment was a measure that was passed by a really high majority of the voters of Berkeley. And so as one of those voters, my intention, I think many people's intention, was that that this board should have considerably more power than the PRC did. That's one of the reasons why it was important to change things and do something different. So I think that the discussion of limiting in some way the power of the board should be one that's a pretty public discussion and not a side conversation with the city attorney. That's where I'm coming from.
Remember, the voters, I think they only had a question in front of them. They didn't have this charter amendment in front of them.
Yes, they did.
The language was there.
Absolutely did.
I'm sure many people didn't read it, but the language was definitely there. Yes. And that is the way all measures work, right?
So it makes an important point about this being something rather than just sending it to the city attorney and then say the city attorney says, no, you can't do it. So we don't even try it. And there's no public discussion. I personally would rather have the public discussion because the voters did want this. And there's no way they were looking at every single nuance, just like the city attorney and the city council, they couldn't have anticipated everything. And it's not written that well. It's really not. Sure. And so I think it's important that the public weigh in, because I think the city council will consider that. And we should have the discussion. Ultimately, they say you can't do it. Okay, we can't do it. But I think it's worth a discussion.
So isn't this a public discussion? Somebody answer that. Isn't this a public discussion? Just because the public's not here doesn't make this is a public discussion, correct?
Well, it'd be more public at the full board meeting. If we're presenting all of the regs to the full board, that'll be much more significant opportunity, and my guess is more members of the public will pay attention.
Sure,
there.
and you have all
Okay,
9
so,
board members.
so then let me ask this question. We have a public discussion, but the charter says, to me, it depends on what the charter says, not what the public says they want or whatever. It's what the
It's
charter
ambiguous,
gives.
though. It's
What?
ambiguous. I think the charter is ambiguous.
That's why we should ask the city attorney. That's who decides what this thing says. That's their role in this, is to give us
Well-
legal guidance.
Well, apparently there's no trust of the city attorney's office. That's what I'm hearing. And the charter, I believe, says we're supposed to use their services.
Why are you, I'm not hearing that, Byron.
I'm not hearing it explicitly.
I have great trust in the city attorney.
Well, let's give them a shot.
I just, I hear what you're saying, Byron, but also we have a hearing panel when the board decides that it's warranted, that more fact finding is warranted. And so I'm imagining a case, and this could be not some kind of oversight on the part of the investigative staff, and it won't be you at that point, Byron. It'll
might
be
be.
somebody with less experience than you. Yes, I know.
We got a case coming up. It might be. Go on.
Less experience than you, but it might be that suddenly after the interviews were finished, and even after the recommendations and findings were written. I mean, I can imagine a situation where some new information emerged.
Kitty, I get that. All I'm asking is to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. I'm not arguing against the PAB having some authority to investigate a process. I'm just saying, I personally don't see it from the charter, and I could be wrong. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm just saying.
It's not very detailed in that respect. I don't see it anywhere one way or the other.
Well, in 18, if you only look at 3 and 5, yes, but when you get to the complaint process in section 18, and it spells out this process.
Yep.
And also, when you just step back and take the helicopter view of this charter amendment, they created this DPA arm, gave them all this money, and they're eventually going to give them more staff to do these investigations. And then they put you guys on this other path. And there's this relationship between you. So I'm still trying to figure all that out. But yes, I get it. Under the PRC, I think we could extend an investigation, right, Kathy? The board could?
I think so. We just have to hit the 120.
It's just now we have these different rules, and I just want us to be.
Does it say I'm looking at 18 and I don't see that it says it. I mean, of course it says the investigator does the investigation, but I don't see anywhere that it says that nothing can follow that.
Because we have all these timelines that happen. This happens. It's all this back and forth. And the other thing is, where do we fit that in? But that's a lesser question.
Well, check
Where is-
18, check 18I.
18I is the biggest problem in this charter because it's
Yes.
conflated two meetings.
Yes.
It's a terrible paragraph.
Mhm.
I know, but it allows for the hearing. And then after 18I, it goes to 18J. And J talks about within 15 days after that hearing, you have to make a decision. If there's nothing in between that says you can extend the investigation, you can do additional investigation within those 15 days. There's nothing in here that says that.
I didn't mean after the hearing. No, I agree. I meant between the reporting of
Investigative findings.
so that we could consider other evidence at the hearing.
Okay.
I'm not
It's
seeing,
something
I'm not seeing
more-
where subpoena power is mentioned in 18. Where is it where it says the director of police accountability has subpoena power? I'm sure it's here. I'm not finding that spot.
It might be under the director's powers before that section. Let's see.
Well, 20, which talks about access to records, also talks about subpoena power. 20C,
Sorry,
20C.
see. Right. So, but that's again, as it was in 3 with the board, that's in general. It's not saying specifically in relation to, it's not within 18.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in fact, 18 doesn't say the director is the one who will do subpoenas. So as board member Calavita has said, it's really pretty ambiguous about who has subpoena power. And I think it basically,
I guess I think at a minimum, we should take this back to the full board. I'm just not comfortable with short circuiting it now because it is ambiguous, that means it can go either way.
What's the process to take it to the full board, Director Lee?
Well, when we take the
the
whole
end.
document,
Yeah.
it'd be at the
We're
end.
not going to take this now.
no,
Not a piece of it.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
no,
So-
no,
no,
no.
no.
You want to flag
So
that
we'll
as
take
a,
and we'll talk about all these things, and this will
Yeah.
no doubt come up as an issue.
sure. Is there a short list of things? Can we create a short list? Because this would probably be at the top of the list, this subpoena issue, and put it as one of the things that we want to make sure to raise and remember to raise to the full board. Noting also that there's been some conversation that some regs members feel that it's appropriate to go to the city attorney's office, but we want to also get the feedback from all the nine heads, brains at the board itself, to air that issue, but also not to say that we would not go to the city's attorneys. But we want to check in with the other folks as well, because it's so core to the functions of the PAB.
And this stuff will be voted on, so
Right.
maybe they won't like some of this stuff anyway. Some of this could be taken out if the full board doesn't want it, right? So
So
that's another,
this
Can I ask-
section,
Yeah.
Kathy, this section C was, the director and the PAB may issue subpoenas. This paragraph was put in, as part of the interim regs, was it?
That's a good question. I think so. You know, we've done so much to this document. I don't remember.
Right, but since this isn't redlined or anything, I'm thinking that was.
Yeah, but things have been accepted, so they're not redlined anymore, but
Yeah,
I
I just don't
think it's
remember
in there.
this issue. I don't remember this issue coming up ever before. And it arose now because Byron very correctly noticed that it was in the section of complaint investigation.
Mhm.
Well, we could agree to just put it, let the board do it under the hearing panel, and then, but let's flesh that process out just a little more then. How's that? And then,
So can I ask a question? Can I?
Here it is.
clarify
It's
something?
9:15 too.
Is-
Time check.
is the
Yeah, it's
question-
9:15.
Is the question related to the staff does an investigation, brings it to the board. The board says, yes, we want to want to do further fact finding. So in between the actual hearing
Yes,
and receipt of the hearing packet from the staff, that the board would say, you know what? I want
Yes.
to do something in additional to what the staff has provided us.
right,
So-
possibly.
wait, that example you gave was prior to the hearing
Yes,
Yes.
or prior to the presentation of the findings and recommendations?
no, prior to the hearing. So
Prior
you,
to the
so
hearing.
basically the question is, staff brings us their investigation with their
Presentation.
recommendation. And staff determines, yes, we want to hold the hearing, but at the same time, staff says, but we want additional information.
The board
So
said.
before the hearing takes place, the staff is recommending additional fact finding before.
The
we-
board.
Yeah, the board is requesting additional fact finding before we even get to the hearing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's what the question is. Is that right?
Right.
yes, to bring it, Cheryl, to bring it to the hearing so that we will be able to consider it during the hearing.
Got it. Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, I
I
thought,
was
I think-
originally thinking you were talking about after the hearing, but I
No,
understand. Okay, I understand better now. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna just, any changes, we should wrap up now. It's
Yeah, I have
9:17
some.
already. aside from the fact that we seem to agree that we're going to move it to the board in the final draft version, any additional flags you want to stick in there or changes to this language?
I
And
was
then,
just thinking that what would be good for us ultimately is to present them with a document and say, these are the big issues. These are the
Yeah.
ones that we see as kind of the thorniest issues.
I think that's good.
To
Like
give them a
short list.
heads up. And my guess is there'll be a handful of them. And we'll
Yeah.
have conversations about that. And then people may point out, wordsmithing or something. But what we really want to get their input on some of these thornier issues, like anonymous complaints. However, we all come to, we haven't even figured that out amongst ourselves yet, but.
I think that's fine. It makes sense to have the entire board to chime in on it, but we've put some work into it. And those are issues that go to the core functions of the PAB in terms of its scope of authority. So we want to make sure they all have vetted it. Okay. Great. So,
Chair, did you want to
Saginaw?
invite Sergeant Castle to, if he has any comments?
Good idea. And so first, Ms. Saginaw seemed to be raising.
I just need to leave. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay.
We're all leaving.
Thank you so much. I
We're all
know.
leaving. Sergeant Castle, do you have, you're not required to, but if you have something to ask or comment upon, please do. As a participant.
Lieutenant Montgomery, you heard some of the conversation we were having around the board asking for more information past what we get from fact finding from staff. And so we're wrestling with the board, either subpoena or whatever, however they get more additional information. What's your thoughts? I'm just curious.
I think as a practical matter, it'll all get funneled, even if it happened that late in the game, which would complicate timelines. It would happen through the DPA's office. I mean, they have all the contacts, who to call, the processes with records, making the requests, etc. It seems like the subpoena power is for documents in most cases. So it just seems like even if you did it that late, which probably won't have time for, it would have to run through their office to be done efficiently.
Good point.
So that's that procedural aspect. Yeah. So we have the procedural aspect, the mechanics, and then also we want to put it in front of the 9 folks just to make sure we all understand the pragmatic aspects, but also the potential repercussions with regard to scope of authority if we were to go one way or the other. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Any other comments before we adjourn? And what number, just to flag that, we were at 6C, was that?
6. Well, it really, I changed it to A because
6A, okay.
the numbering was off on that. I just noticed that.
Okay.
So it's I will notify you by email about possible dates, but I will
Okay.
tell you there's no date everybody is available until March 10th. So you're going to have to make a decision about who you're going to miss. But I'll let you know what that looks like.
Okay.
One quick question. Keep in touch with me, Kathy, because I don't know at this point if we want to hold off inviting the official from San Diego. I think maybe we want to get through most of the rest of this, and then what do you all think?
I
Yeah, we
think
probably
you're
need to get
right.
some
Good idea.
traction. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll hold off.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So no public comment. It's just there's 8 participants. Doesn't appear to be. There's no members of the public, right? Except for Mr.
Except for,
Castle.
no other public members.
Okay. So not seeing any and not seeing any raised hands for public comment. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Adjourned.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.